The first sign isn't a candle, it's a buzz. A phone on the counter shivers like a moth, and suddenly the night has a group chat. Pins bloom on a map like ember constellations. A printer exhales a route that smells faintly of warm paper and plans. Somewhere a playlist wakes, politely. Somewhere else a teenager edits a sign-up sheet until it looks like kindness with checkboxes. Tell me, when did the bonfire learn to speak Wi-Fi? When did? Who's got the flashlight? Become a link you can tap? Tonight, the old verbs open, offer, praise, escort, rest will travel through glass before they land on wood, and the neighborhood will glow first in pixels, then in pumpkins. Don't worry. We're not replacing the knock. We're just lighting the way to it. Chapter 1. When the year held its breath. Before plastic masks and porch lights, before doorbells learned to sing in October, there was a hill at the edge of the known world, wild grass slick with dew, peat smoke lifting like a hush, and a crowd of human beings who understood fear not as entertainment, as weather. This was Salmon, pronounced Sa-win, the Celtic hinge between light and dark, harvest and hunger, the year that was and the year that might be. On this night, the ordinary calendar didn't just turn, it thinned. If you listen closely, and we should, because YouTube loves careful ears, you'll hear doors unlatch softly across centuries as people prepare to meet what they cannot name without trembling. They begin by extinguishing their hearths. This is not a dramatization, it's logistics with ritual bones. Across Ireland, Scotland, and the Isle of Man, flames are willingly snuffed, rooms cool, shadows learn new shapes. Family by family, the land goes dim until only hilltops burn, great bonfires tended by ritual specialists whose job is half theology, half emergency management. If a winter goes wrong, belief is not the only thing that starves. From these crowned hills, Tlachta in Meath is the name archaeologists whisper. The Hill of Ward, where fire festivals left their signature in charcoal, villagers carry back new embers to relight their homes. It's a magnificent image, yes, but it's also the early technology of solidarity, one flame shared into many, a network drawn in coals. What made this night scary? To those who first kept it. Not goblins with marketing campaigns, not even stories with teeth. The fear that ruled Samhain was uncertainty, the lengthening dark, the thin margins of food, the way illness rode cold air with the entitlement of a king. Salmon named this tension and turned it into a schedule. If the year must pass into danger, pass together. If darkness arrives as a fact, answer with organized light. All the same, folklore took its seat by the fire. The old belief, the one you'll still hear in modern whispers, is that the barrier between worlds slackened to the width of breath. The dead might visit, not as meat for nightmares, but as family with poor timing. Hospitality, then, is both wisdom and insurance. Bread at the threshold, a cup set for a grandmother whose footsteps are remembered as a rhythm rather than a sound. And where hospitality fails, camouflage helps. Animal hides and antlers, soot-blackened faces, shrouds that turn a person into almost not a strategy older than costume aisles. Break the fourth wall with me for a heartbeat. Do you see how practical this is? The point wasn't to play at monsters. It was to confuse them long enough to get home. Not everything in the night is solemn. Divination, the soft magic of guessing kindly at fate, thrives exactly when outcomes feel most out of reach. Apples float in a tub, because water tells truths no wisp of smoke will. Whoever bites first, the village jokes, will marry first. Peel an apple in one long ribbon and toss it over your shoulder. The shape it makes on the floor looks like a letter if you squint with the courage of youth. Hazelnuts are fed to flame in pairs. The pop that jumps toward the heart means passion. The skitter that flips away means better friends than lovers. It's adorable, yes, but it's also medicine. Chance dressed as play, hope rehearsed out loud. Then empire arrives the way empires do. Boots, roads, and calendars. Romans bring their own rituals for the dead, Feralia, and a harvest devotion to Pomona, a goddess, whose apple becomes history's favorite prop. These observances blend not as conquest, but as chemistry. A fruit luck game here, a memorial there, and you have a festival that can survive migration and creed change. You can still hear the echo when a child ducks toward a bobbing apple and erupts into air, cheeks pink, the room cheering. A small act of bravery and breath control masquerading as silliness. That's ancient practice, wearing a party hat. Centuries tilt. Mission churches and monasteries lace the landscape like stitches in a repeatedly torn seam. Erasure rarely works, reframing often does. In the 8th and 9th centuries, the Church moves All Saints' Day to November 1 and formalizes All Souls on November 2. The evening vigil becomes All Hallows' Eve, and Salmon's grammar learns Latin without losing vernacular. Bells toll for the dead, candles burn in windows to guide the remembered home. The poor go souling door to door with songs and prayers, asking for spiced soul cakes in exchange for intercession. This is theology as public works, mercy moving through streets as carbohydrate and comfort. Around this time, the face of the holiday grows teeth-carved ones. In Ireland and Scotland, boys and bold girls hollow out turnips or mangolds, cut grimaces into the wet, pale flesh, and set embers inside. The glow is homely and a bit comic, a portable ward against trouble that dislikes eye contact. When those same communities cross the ocean centuries later and meet an American field swollen with pumpkins, the lantern scales up and the logic stays exact. Carve a face, give the dark something to negotiate with, carry light. But we're racing ahead. We are still on the moor, still in the medieval churchyard, still at the kitchen table where a soul cake cools next to a window, glossed with your breath. What made these Halloweens? Scary. In the way that matters. Liminality. The rules that keep you safe on an ordinary Tuesday loosen not to invite chaos, but to admit that life has borders, and some of them need careful crossing. Mischief is licensed in small doses, because a society that never flips itself for a minute often breaks for a year. Children guise a Scottish verb that will become disguise, and earn their treats with verses and jokes, a tiny economy of performance for kindness that prevents stones from visiting window glass later in the evening. It's not that fear is absent, it's that fear is managed. You can chart the sensory map of the night. Candle tallow says bees. Turnips say earth. Wet wool says we live here. Outside the church, the yew is darker than its surroundings in a way that makes the night feel design rather than empty. In narrow lanes, lanterns swing like punctuation. The breeze uses the graveyard wall to tell you secrets about winter you already suspected. A bell's last vibration is the sound of permission to go home. If a child asks whether the dead are close, the answer is practical. Close enough to hear us be kind. Occasionally, the night errs on the side of instruction. A lantern's candle blows out, and a group squeals and laughs, and then looks someone shields the flame with a hand, while another relights it with a patient coal. A path through bog ignites a folktale about a wicked fairy, precisely because the bog is real, and the fairy makes a better warning than mud. A black dog is seen at a crossroads, because dogs are wonderful at being dogs, and crossroads are wonderful at inviting stories. We can accept these bits of folklore in the most YouTube-compliant way possible, as behavioral technology encoded in narrative, teaching children where not to wander, and adults how to keep a reputation intact in a village whose memory is longer than any one lifespan. There are years that really are worse than others. Harvest fails not everywhere, not equally, but in ways that thin faces in November. Plague rides wines you can't see, bells earn blisters. All Hallows then is not stagecraft, it is triage for the soul. Families light candles, not to be quaint, but to prevent absence from turning into erasure. Say the names. A mother instructs, and the children do, stumbling over a kinsman's consonants until memory corrects them. You might expect our camera to turn away here. It doesn't. It simply chooses gentleness. We keep our shots steady on the candle, and the breath warming cold glass. The scariest Halloweens, the ones we promise to tell, are scariest because life itself becomes uncertain, and communities answer with rituals that rehearse hope. And then, unexpectedly, there is laughter. There is always laughter. In a corner of the room, a cluster of cousins tries the old mirror games candle in hand, glimpse your future in the glass and spook one another until a grandmother coughs, the ancient punctuation mark that means enough, you'll never sleep. On the lane, wild hunt. Tale is retold with increasing horses and decreasing logic, until even the teller grins at his own audacity. Mischief night moves a gate and a bench, and no one's temper. It turns out the most durable trick of this holiday is how it makes pleasure out of dread without lying about the cold. So, what do we carry forward from this first chapter into the centuries of headlines, parades, and porch lights waiting ahead? 5 tools, handed down like heirlooms, disguised as habits. Light you can carry. From hilltop embers to lantern turnips to pumpkin LEDs, the technology changes, the promise doesn't. Names spoken aloud. All Hallows is memory maintenance. Fear hates roll call. Reciprocity at the door. Soul cakes for prayers becomes treats, for jokes becomes trick or treat. But the bargain kindness for order never expires. Masks that humble, not inflame. Disguises confuse harm, not invite it. Licensed inversion. A little misrule, carefully supervised, keeps a town from breaking in bigger ways. If you want the smallest artifact that still smells like the original fire, it's the threshold. The place where outside becomes inside and back again. In the oldest Halloweens, thresholds got bread and candles and attention. In ours, they get rubber bats and doorbells and bowls the size of a farmer's hat. Nothing essential has changed. A door opens because we have agreed that for one night, the unknown will be met with welcome, under rules we make together. Let me ask you quietly, conspiratorially, what scares you about Halloween now? Not the costume and not the stories, but the thing under the thing. Is it the awareness that nights lengthen, that time moves, that memory asks to be carried? The people who stood on those hills, warmed by bonfires the gods could see, felt the same current. They invented a ritual to stand in it without being washed away. That's our beginning, a community putting its hands around a flame and calling it a plan. From here we'll sail toward churchyards, pandemics, parades, panics, and porch republics, toward the very specific Octobers that went wrong and the cleverness that set them right. But don't rush the hill just yet. Listen. The fire lowers itself to a steady heart. Someone next to you says a name you don't know in a voice you'd follow anywhere. Far off, a bell tries and then decides it has earned its silence. The door you'll go through in a minute will make a sound you'll remember in April. And somewhere between ember and latch, the first Halloween closes like a good book and hands you its light to keep. Chapter 2. The Churchyard and the Candle. The hilltop fires thin into smaller flames, lantern light cupped in hands, beeswax stuttering in stone rooms where breath fogs the glass. We've stepped into the Middle Ages now, where a village is a handful of roofs gathered around a bell that knows everyone's name. Halloween has learned new grammar. All Hallows' Eve, a vigil before All Saints' Day, flowing into All Souls, 3 nights, braided like a cord, so the living can pull memory close without tearing it. The old Celtic hinge still creaks, but now it swings on iron, and the sound is a hymn. Open the church door with me. The nave is cool even when bodies are warm. Flags of candle smoke drift toward rafters that remember summer swallows. Plain chant moves like water over stones, slow, deliberate, unafraid of silence. A sister sets new wicks. A boy in a patched surplice tries very hard not to stare at the way his own candle gutters and recovers, learning in one flicker why steadiness became a virtue. Outside, yew trees hold their blacker green against the dusk, guardians that need no training. The village, which by day is a mill and a market and a list of chores, becomes a list of names. They read them. The baker who laughed too loudly, the baby whose cradle is clean and still, the fisherman who always tied the best knots. This is not morbid, it is maintenance. Memory is a roof. When the prayers end, the door opens and colder air speaks. Families drift into the churchyard stones, tilted like books left open in the rain. A mother sets a candle on a grave and warms her hands over a flame too small to matter to weather, and exactly the right size to matter to a person. A child traces letters with a mitten, P-E-T-E-R. The father clears his throat softly and says, "Do you remember?" And because this is the correct liturgy, the others do. The scariest thing here is not a ghost, it is forgetting. The remedy is story told at a stone. Meanwhile, the lanes learn a new knock. Sowling. Poor folk children, widows, apprentices go door to door and ask for soul cakes, small spice-sweet rounds pricked with a cross, sometimes currants pressed in like constellations. In return, they promise prayers for a household's dead. The theology is clear-eyed. Purgatory has work to do, and the economics are kinder than they look. Bread moves toward hungry mouths. Intercession moves toward loved names. A village practices reciprocity with sugar. A door opens, a cake changes hands, a prayer is pledged like a coin that never tarnishes. If you squint, you can already see the future script. Trick or treat. Waiting in this polite exchange. By the way, costumes didn't vanish, they softened. In the Scottish north, children guys' faces darkened with soot, shawls borrowed, a paper crown or burlap mask, then earn their cakes with a verse or a joke. Performance is the toll. It sounds small. It is civilization. Give mischief a stage, and windows keep their glass. Give the shy a script, and courage comes out to play. The door is where a culture teaches its young to belong on both sides of a threshold. And because we're telling this for a gentle screen, let's keep the lens on craft and sound. Hear the papery shuffle of soul cakes on a board. The talk of the bell rope in the beetle's hands. The sift of frost over the grass when feet pass, making a map that melts by noon. Smell tallow and wet wool and bread. Feel the grain of the old gate where someone tied a posy because grief needed somewhere to put its hands. The night has rules, and not all of them are written. Lanterns, turnips, and mangolds carved with grimaces and lit within glow at doorways. They're household guardians, ancestors to pumpkins, practical as well as storyful, light you can carry, wind baffled by wet, pale walls. If one blows out, nobody screams. Someone shields and relights. I'm looking at you through the fourth wall for a beat. Notice how often the holidays drama is solved by a hand. In some towns, the charnel house, that tidy archive where older bones rest, receives candles in its niches, a starfield of respect for the anonymous dead. It sounds eerie. The intent is comfort. Even if a name is lost, someone's light still finds it. You're wondering where fear prowls. It's there, but it wears ordinary clothes. A lane is slick, a lantern fails, a traveler mistakes a bog path and returns with a tale about a PCA that is really a map with bite. A black dog sits at a crossroads because crossroads have always been excellent at inviting stories, and dogs have always been excellent at being dogs. The plague years? We won't make a spectacle. We will let a bell toll longer, watch candles multiply in windows. Notice that soul cakes are thinner and prayers thicker. The scariest Halloweens in this era are not boo, but burden, and the answer's always more shared light. Meanwhile, inversion arrives, on schedule wearing a grin. The night before or after, depending on the parish, mischief borrows the keys and makes small edits. A gate swapped with a neighbor's, a cart respectfully relocated to a yard where it looks absurd and not harmful. The joke is never about damage. It is about reminding the world it can flex. A community that doesn't invert breaks. A community that only inverts dissolves. So the church registers a few mild complaints, and the town registers a healthy pulse. There are local dialects of the ritual that deserve their close-up. In Wales, windows bloom with toy-lights for lost souls. In Brittany, families leave bread and cider at an empty place at table because a visitor is expected, seen or not. In parts of Italy, sweets arrive from the dead, which sounds like a dare and operates like a hug. Across these variations, the thesis stays, the veil thins, so we practice hospitality. The night is practical too. Door to door is surveillance in velvet gloves. The old woman who didn't open last year? Someone notices the dark window and checks. The apprentice who fell ill after harvest. Someone at the threshold says his name, and the housekeeper gives news and a little extra food for your prayers. The church is a building. The doorstep is the infrastructure. Shall we glance through the glass at one household? There's a turnip lantern on the sill, its carved scowl surprisingly tender from the inside. A board of cakes cools by the hearth. A child practices a rhyme and forgets the middle. An aunt whisper prompts without shaming. A knock. The door opens. And then the exchange that will outlive fashions by a millennium, a face, a greeting, a small offering, a blessing, an exit. The door closes with a click you'll remember in April. Not every All Hallows is equal. There are years when storm rides up the valley and makes every house a ship. Years when bandits are rumored and the bell rope hangs heavier in the beadle's hand. Years when harvest was thin and the cakes are more prayer than spice. These are the scariest Halloweens, if we must rank them, not because specters walked, but because contingency did. The rituals don't banish risk. They transform it into tasks. Light the candle. Speak the name. Share the cake. Toll the bell. Check the neighbor. The oldest spell in Europe is a to-do list. We should also speak of silence, which is the loudest instrument in this chapter's orchestra. After the last knock, after the last God bless you, the village rests in a kind of held breath. The bell does not ring again. The U does its job without music. The last candle makes its tiny sigh and becomes memory. If you grew up with jump scare Halloweens, this version might feel like a lullaby. That's not an accident. In a century that knew alarms, this night specialized in soothing the nerve while training it to notice. A brief fourth wall question: what are we rehearsing, really, in these medieval Octobers? Not fright. Coordination. Not superstition. Courtesy extended to the unseen, which is how a community learns to extend it to the seen. That's the thread we'll keep pulling as we sail for the new world. Doors, lights, names, exchange, a little mischief under supervision, a lot of mercy, with sugar on top. For now, let's step back across the threshold and watch the churchyard settle. Frost spokes out from each candle's stub. A last group of solars turns the corner, singing off-key, victorious. A mother lifts a sleeping child whose head has become heavy with cakes and courage. The door closes. The latch speaks its small, satisfying sentence. In the morning, there will be chores again, disputes again, weather again. But tonight, the village has reminded itself of the most subversive thing a society can do in the face of fear: open, offer, remember, rest. Chapter 3. Across the Water, When Turnips Learn to Smile. The Atlantic is a long hallway to carry a holiday down. In the holds of immigrant ships, salt-cured hope, damp blankets, the squeak of timber that has opinions about every wave people smuggled October in their pockets, a rhyme, a recipe, a way of knocking at a door that means we belong to one another. They brought Salmon's Hinge and All Hallows Candle, and when their feet found wharves named Boston, Philadelphia, New York, Charleston, they set their old rituals on new soil and waited to see what would grow. At first, in Puritan New England, Halloween found the porch unlit. Anything that smelled of popery or paganism was dismissed as untidy theology. If the dead wanted remembering, they could wait for Sunday. But people are stubborn, and memory is patient. South and West, among Anglicans, Catholics, Scots, Irish settlers, and in port towns where customs mingle like tides, October kept its manners. Harvest suppers, husking bees, barn dances. Children learned country games that were really old rights in new shoes. Apple peel initials tossed over a shoulder, mirror glances for a dare, the kind of silly courage that becomes adulthood's muscle memory later, when you need it. And then the land itself answered the question no theologian could: what will we carve? The old world had turnips and mangolds, pale lanterns with grim little faces to shepherd and warn. The new world, smug and generous, offered pumpkins the size of cradles. Someone hollowed one with a spoon and discovered a miracle. Candlelight looked happy in an orange room. The logic remained: guard the threshold, carry light, but the scale changed. A jack-o'-lantern on a colonial stoop said, in an accent that was learning to be American, "We are here. Kindly spirits, come in." Everything else, move along. Jack-o'-lantern traveled with a story in its coat. Stingy Jack, the trickster who outwitted the devil and paid for it by wandering with a coal in a carved root. Folklore is generous with details and stingy with proof. It doesn't matter. The tale gave the face a name, and the name gave the candle a job. A child holding a pumpkin pail in 1850 or 1950 or 2050 is participating in a bargain older than any nation: light for safe passage. In colonial kitchens, with doors bolted against weather and other uncertainties, October had an indoor life. A spider pot, the iron kind, hung over coals. Apples hissed in butter and spice. Girls in linen tried not to smile while dropping walnut shells into water to see whose boat would follow whose. Boys in buckles and bravado. Guised. After the Scottish manner, shawls and soot, crowns of paper and gumption, and earned bits of nutcake or a laugh for a well-timed couplet. Mummers knocked rough plays on a clean floor. St. George in a tin breastplate hammered by a cousin, a dragon that looked suspiciously like a quilt on two brave legs. In their cape's lining, mischief slept politely, then woke for 10 minutes and went back to bed. Where is fear in these early American Octobers? Not in monsters. In distance. A river crossed at dusk. A lane that decides to be marsh. A winter that courts your roofline like a question you'd rather not answer. The scariest Halloweens were cold, or thin on flour, or ended with a lantern that blew out too far from home. Folktales did their old job. Don't cross the bridge after the first frost. Don't linger where the creek bends. Don't ignore a light in the window. It means someone is sick and watching for an answer. Time rolls forward. Ships continue to arrive with newcomers from Ireland, especially after the 1840s famine and Scotland. And suddenly, America's October vocabulary fills out. Guising becomes a fashionable verb. Lanterns multiply. The dead, always nearby at the edge of harvest, are given a chair more openly at the table. In New Orleans, Catholic cemeteries learn a custom of visitation that looks eerie on a postcard and feels like family when you are there. Whitewashed tombs, chrysanthemums, a lunch shared among the old stones because grief and love both eat. Let's break the fourth wall gently. We promised a YouTube-safe lens, so our camera stays with craft and kindness, not jump scares. Hear the knife whisper through pumpkin flesh, the hollow ronk as seeds drop into a bowl. Smell molasses in a gingerbread meant for small hands. Feel the grain of a pew as a child's legs swing, waiting for the bell to finish blessing the evening so the real work can begin, going door to door in order to turn strangers into neighbors. By the mid-1800s, cities glow with gaslight. Mischief, which once meant swapping gates and chalking poetry, learns swagger in crowded streets. There are Halloweens when boys and a few daring girls get opinions about pranks and windows, learn new verbs like break. Headlines frown. Police departments keep taller ledgers. Communities clever, tired, wise counter with parades and parties, afternoon frolics in measured light, apple bobbing with clean towels at the ready, donuts on strings that make adults laugh until they forget to be stern. The strategy is older than any ordinance, licensed inversion under supervision. Immigrant neighborhoods stitch their customs into the American quilt with exuberant seam allowances. A house on one block floats soul cakes under a new name. On the next, a carved squash that isn't quite a pumpkin guards a stoop because the grocer was out, and improvisation is also an old rite. On a corner, a fiddler arrives in a flat cap and lends rhythm to a dance that pretends it's spontaneous. Across the street, a baker places a candle near a photograph and speaks a name in a language the neighbor doesn't understand and doesn't need to in order to feel the weight. What about trick or treat? It is not born in a single year so much as admitted to citizenship. As the 20th century approaches, Solling trims its theology and keeps its manners. Children knock with performances, a joke, a song, then with costumes, a joke embodied, and eventually with the efficient phrase that distills 1,000 years of exchange to 4 syllables, trick or treat. The adult at the door smiles because they know the trick is mostly myth and the treat is policy. It's a social contract with sugarcoating. We agree to delight one another in a sequence. We agree to end at a reasonable hour. If you want a single American evening to carry forward, come stand on a street in the 1890s as dusk decides the color of itself. Porch lamps wake one by one, and a block becomes a constellation. Pumpkins exhale that friendly vegetable warmth. Somewhere a harmonica makes an argument for courage. Children cluster, take orders from the oldest like ducklings from a responsible aunt. A door opens. Compliments are deployed with ceremony. A paper sack whispers as a small weight lands in it. The child says, "Thank you," in a voice that has practiced. The door closes with a satisfying click that promises the world is briefly arranged. There were scary Halloweens Of course, years of cholera when doorways were cautious, harvest failures when cakes were thin, a winter storm that arrived early and made jack-o'-lanterns into nightlights for snow. But even then, the ritual proved strangely waterproof. Move it earlier. Move it inside. Shorten the route, lengthen the kindness. The choreography is the genius, not the props. And the pumpkin, it becomes emblem, printmaking alphabet for the new nation's October. Newspapers engrave it. Postcards mail it to absent cousins. Later, manufacturers fold it into tissue paper globes and die-cut cats. Later still, into orange plastic pails that glow like portable embers. A child swinging one up a tenement stair or down a gravel lane is reenacting the hilltop ember ceremony without knowing the word for it. That's my favorite definition of tradition. A task your hands remember before your mind learns why. I'll leave you with one last doorway. An Irish grandmother in a shawl spreads brown bread on a board still warm from the oven. A Scottish grandfather, less gruff than he pretends, carves a face into a pumpkin and murmurs something about how wasteful it is not to cook the seeds. He will roast them later with salt and pride. A black neighbor brings sorghum candy crackling in wax paper, and a story about a October from his childhood 3 states away. Children lean on elbows and on each other, stiff with anticipation. Someone lights the pumpkin with ceremony too large for the room. The face glows and stops being a joke. It becomes a promise. If you're keeping score, the tools we carried from Europe have survived the crossing. Portable light, names aloud, reciprocity at the door, masks that humble, brief inversion. America adds scale and neon, and for a while, headlines. But the pulse doesn't change. Knock. Open. Offer. Thank. Rest. Next, we'll let the newspapers speak. We'll hear how broadcasts and rumors tried to rename the night, and how porches politely corrected them. But remember this chapter's gentle thesis as we go. The scariest Halloweens in these years were not the ones with cackles. They were the ones with empty larders and long walks. The remedy, then as now, was the same choreography we're still teaching our children. Go together, follow the light, say the names, and carry little warm glow home. Chapter 4. Headlines at the Door. By the early 20th century, Halloween had learned to glow in gas, and then electric light. Porches rehearsed their welcome like a hymn. Pumpkins, big, obliging, practiced their vowels. And then a new actor took the stage at October's edge, the media newspapers with whose breath smelled faintly of ink and hurry, radio with its velvet voice, television with perfect hair, and a lower third that could turn rumor into weather. The holiday that began as a whisper by a bonfire now had a microphone. What happens when a night devoted to small rituals meets an industry devoted to big stories? You already know the answer. Headlines knock, louder than doorbells. First, the microphone mischief. It's October 30, 1938. A radio play interrupts its own music with bulletins so convincing they pull at the country's pulse. You've heard the title, We Won't Shout It Here. Some listeners check the date and grin, some change the dial, Some feel their throats tighten around an impossible report from a New Jersey field. By morning, newspapers are hawking panic, as if it were taffy. Did the nation truly tremble? Historians argue. What matters for our gentle purpose is the lesson. Fear can travel faster than feet, and a microphone can make a rumor feel like a visitor standing in your hall. Halloween learns to hold its breath around broadcasts. Then war. Porch bulbs dim under blackout orders. Parades come early and indoors. The choreography we've practiced for centuries proves nimble. School gyms unroll crepe paper at 2 p.m. Apple barrels hold auditions for courage beneath basketball hoops. Women in sensible shoes pin reflective tape onto capes, a stitch that is also a blessing. The scariest thing about those Halloweens isn't monsters. It's silence where streetcars used to hum and the way a warden's bicycle whispers on a dark street, reminding you that safety sometimes looks like less light, not more. After the war, America turns the dimmer up. Suburbs bloom and learn to synchronize porch switches like constellations, coached by a neighborhood association. Civic groups invent the children's parade mischief, given a marching order, a drum. Photographers fall in love with jack-o'-lanterns, magazines print paper witches with arched backs. The holiday flirts with commerce and finds the relationship surprisingly functional. A charity button appears on the costume, trick or treat for UNICEF. Little cartons jingle with coins. A doorstep ritual takes a gentle look outward. If fear has a rival, it is often generosity with a handle. And yet, by the late 1960s and 1970s, a rumor with excellent shoes comes striding down the block. Tainted candy, hidden blades. The facts, examined without theater, are thin as tissue. The stories, told with good lighting, grow teeth. TV anchors hold up apples and razor blades for the camera. PTA newsletters translate what if into what now. A nation rehearses a new October etiquette, only factory-wrapped treats, no eating en route, routes planned on paper maps with clip art pumpkins, grown-ups walking the curb like invisible guardrails. We won't name the darkest cases. We'll keep our promise to stay YouTube kind. But we can honor the counter-ritual they birthed, care scaled up. Watch A Doorway in 1978. The bowl is half meteorology. How fast is this storm of children moving? And half apothecary wrappers checked, crimps inspected, labels read. Apples, Pomona's old currency, float to the kitchens off camera, future as pie. A parent kneels, which is a choreography of love. A child narrates the night with sleeve-tugging urgency. The dog sits with monk-like patience and earns the unglamorous pretzel. Across the street, another parent lifts a flashlight, like a small lighthouse, and sweeps it through the air, a language of beams, this way. Watch the curb. You look magnificent, tiny pirate. Rumor loses some teeth when attention stands in the doorway. Communities professionalize delight. PTAs host harvest nights on gym floors that squeak with approval. Trunk or treat appears in church parking lots, a ring of hatchbacks transformed into a miniature main street, each trunk a stall in a kinder bazaar. Police departments print routes and hours, hardware stores stock reflective tape beside capes, Firehouses demonstrate candle-safe pumpkins with oven mitts on local TV. The old bargain mischief in exchange for supervision gets a fluorescent vest and a clipboard. If we stepped outside the story to compose a soundscape and it would be this: the papery crackle of wrappers becoming tiny certificates of trust, the click of a flashlight finding shoes, the thrum of a portable speaker giving the block an upbeat, a doorbell that has never been so proud to earn its keep. We wouldn't show you harm, we'd show you infrastructure, because the most moving thing about Halloween's rumor years was not the fear, but the civic creativity that answered it. Some cities fight a different headline. In Detroit, arson tries to steal October's name Devil's Night, and for a run of years the sky blushes the wrong shade of orange. The answer is an army of neighbors in reflective vests and common sense: Angel's Night, porches staffed like lighthouses, block clubs with thermoses and radios, teenagers drafted into the work of staying visible. A camera could be cruel here, ours won't. Listen instead to the cheke of a walkie-talkie, the quiet clink of a thermos lid, the soft, "You all right?" asked twice and meant both times. Eventually, the flames shrink back to candles and pumpkins, where they belong. There are other interruptions: storms with names, blackouts with opinions, pandemic years when air itself becomes a careful subject. Each time, the night pivots with domestic elegance. Porch candy becomes bagged and clipped to fences. PVC treat chutes deliver chocolate with a satisfying shh. Sidewalks sprout chalk arrows. Parades turn to drive-bys. Masks. The thrill shifts from boo to look what we invented. The scariest Halloweens are the ones that cancel themselves. Most don't. They move. And through it all, the headlines insist on telling the holiday what it is. Horror franchises announce themselves like marching bands. Morning shows demo last-minute costumes from items found in your pantry. A consumer segment declares the year of 12-foot skeletons and then proves it empirically on every lawn. The Porch Republic smiles, plays along, and continues doing what it has always done: open, compliment, feed courage with sugar and eye contact. Do you want a composite evening stitched from these loud decades, softened for sleep? Dusk blue. A screen door claps and apologizes. Pumpkins smell like warm vegetable and candle. Children, rehearsed by older siblings, gather at a curb and practice thank you under their breath, like it's a spell it is. A teenager in a cape takes the door shift before heading out, part penance, part rite of passage, telling every robot and butterfly. Epic costume. With actorly sincerity. Across the street, a parent nods a tiny semaphore. "We've got this side, you take that one." A patrol car idles politely and becomes a prop in the set, safety visible, not nervous. By 9, the bowl by your door is empty, but for 3 stubborn strawberry candies that no child ever truly wants. You will eat them anyway, out of principle. A last cluster of costumes wobbles down the sidewalk. Their chaperones speak the weary dialect of satisfaction. Inside, rappers whisper as they become a small geology on the living room rug. Trades are negotiated with a jurisprudence that would impress Rome. Someone lights a votive beside a photograph, not for spectacle but for continuity. The porch light clicks off, somewhere down the block. Another stays on a little longer, the way a neighbor keeps a conversation alive at the fence. Headlines will come again tomorrow, some of them worried on your behalf. Let them. The holiday outlives them because the choreography holds: gather, walk, knock, open, praise, share, escort, wave, sleep. The scariest Halloweens of the modern era were not a triumph of terror, they were a stress test of coordination, one the porches keep passing, annually, with style. Next, we'll follow the night into the eras when electricity failed and the sky wore other intentions: blackouts, ice snaps, hurricanes that tried to rename the calendar, and we'll watch how people carried the ember indoors and kept the ritual intact. For now, listen to the house settle. Hear the last candle, make its tiny sigh, and become memory. That sound quieter than any headline is Halloween telling you what it has always been: a plan for the dark. Chapter 5: Blackouts and Borrowed Light. The scariest Halloweens are not the ones with rubber fangs. They're the ones that begin with a finger to the lips. Imagine a town that knows the choreography: porch lights cued like stars, pumpkins practicing their vowels, and then picture an air raid warden in a brimmed hat lifting a gloved hand. Dark. Bulbs twist loose. Curtains turn to night. The street forgets it ever had edges. Halloween, which has always been a plan for the dark, now has to do its work inside of it. We're in the 1940s first, coastal America, and beleaguered Britain, where blackout orders make night a civic instrument. The siren that once meant parade now means patience. Candles are hooded low, jack-o'-lanterns grin from behind deep-cut lids, cardboard shields shade upstairs windows. Outside, even the moon feels examined. Inside, the holiday shifts key. Afternoon costume parades in gymnasiums that smell like varnish and orange slices, apple-bubbing tubs stationed beneath basketball hoops, donuts strung on twine from a volleyball net while a PTA volunteer sainted by a safety pin keeps the line honest. The soundscape changes too, not doorbells, but the soft squeak of sneakers, the quiet tick of a bicycle as the warden glides past, and somewhere, a phonograph coaxing courage from a scratchy waltz. Costumes learn rationing's grammar and look excellent in it. Capes from blackout curtain offcuts. Robot armor hammered from stovepipe and possibility. A witch's hat stiffened with laundry starch, her broom's bristle inherited from a real broom that got promoted. Treats become more tender, one caramel, wrapped like a jewel, a wedge of gingerbread, a paper cone of roasted peanuts the shape of a promise. Children stand taller for smaller sweets because the compliment is the other half of the candy. We'll break the fourth wall for a beat. Notice how the holiday gets safer by becoming more specific, less spectacle, more hands. Our camera stays on fingers tying string, on the wink of a flashlight, on the breath a child takes before saying thank you as if it were a spell. Across the ocean, London's Hallowtide All Hallows, All Souls tucks itself beneath the Blitz's barometric pressure. Church crypts shelter bodies and fear. Vigil candles do double duty as morale. Children carry gas masks that bump their knees. Bells sometimes ring and sometimes don't, because bells can be messages, and messages can be mistakes. Scary Halloween. Here doesn't mean boo, it means a season of thresholds. Yet families still lower lanterns into carved mangolds, still set bread at a memory's place, because ritual is insulation where wool can't reach. When the war loosens its grip, the switch flips the other way, brightness as policy. In 1950s suburbs, porch bulbs bloom like a small galaxy under municipal care. The children's parade returns to the street. Brass bands learn Monster Mash years before it's written. Adults who spent nights watching the sky for the wrong lights now overlight on purpose. Plywood witches with motorized brooms, sheet ghosts on clotheslines, a plywood cat that blinks because your uncle won the argument with a soldering iron. It looks like whimsy. It is also recovery, a public vow to be visible, to open, to normalize the sound of feet on sidewalks at dusk. But the dark has other tools. In the 1970s, energy crises dim the neon, shorten hours. Some Halloweens go earlier, tighten their routes, or retreat into block parties where the geography fits inside 2 extension cords and a hymn book. The choreography survives in pieces like stained glass, school cafeteria lines offering cocoa and compliments, a cul-de-sac's lawn chairs forming a polite barricade against traffic, a hand-lettered sign on a rec center that reads, "Costumes, welcome, power optional." Not every blackout is policy. Weather enjoys an entrance. An October wind bulldozes through a neighborhood and turns maples into confetti machines. Ice writes its signature across the curb. Snow spites orange with white. These are the Halloweens your neighbors recall with an affectionate shiver, the year the firehouse parked at the corner and became the moon with its headlights. The year the super opened the lobby, and the building trick-or-treated itself, floor by floor. Elevator as parade float. The year the block ran on battery tea lights and stubbornness, and a toddler learned the word lantern so decisively that it became a favorite for months. YouTube safe aside, it's tempting to dramatize damage. We won't. The drama is in ingenuity. The zip of duct tape turning a drop cloth into a wall, the squeegee clearing a gym door so capes don't slip, the thunk of folding tables making a main street, the shh of a PVC candy chute delivering chocolate into a pail like a tiny miracle of gravity, and civic engineering. The scary part lasts a minute. The lights blink. The room inhales, and then the plan stands up and calls roll. Everyone here? Good. Proceed. Blackout etiquette accretes like lichen on a beloved stone. Sand buckets sit politely near candles. Extension cords wear tape like seat belts. Inflatables get grounded before weather turns them into kites. Kids sprout reflectors on hems, zippers, even the backs of cardboard shields where a beam can find them. Flashlights multiply along the route on wrists, in pockets, in the hand of the parent who knows the curb better than the curb knows itself. If the old bonfire signaled from hill to hill, our LEDs signal porch to porch. We are here. Come safely, turn left at the skeleton playing the tuba. Sometimes the bravest move is postponement. A mayor clears her throat on the radio and announces, with the solemnity of a bell, that trick or treat will be Saturday at 3. At first it feels like moving a solstice. Then the day arrives, and the ritual proves that it never belonged to a square box on a calendar. costumes reappear slightly rumpled and more beloved. Pumpkins smile their softer, second smiles. The same compliments get spoken, which is the point. Other times the answer is concentration. A school gym becomes a small city under string lights. A librarian sets up a corner labeled gently spooky and reads about a ghost who prefers tea to haunting. A custodian monarch of the floor sweeps a canvas of footprints clean between parades with formal gravitas. In the corner, a grandparent whispers to a child, "You were brave indoors." And the sticker that bears those words becomes a talisman. If we're being honest, half of adulthood is collecting stickers for what we did with the lights off, and the rules changed. Blackouts, whether by order or weather, also remind the night who it's for. Inclusion becomes obvious when the world lacks volume. Sensory-friendly hours arrive, no strobe, soft sound. Teal pumpkins glow on porches to signal non-food treats for kids with allergies. A few windows set out blue pumpkin pails to say, without speeches, words optional, joy required. The dark turns communities into careful listeners. You can almost hear the neighborhood adjusting its dimmer, louder on cedar, hush on birch. The big spider on maple stands down between 6 and 7. And occasionally the dark brings actual silence, the sort that makes a story choose a smaller voice. A frame on a mantel glows beside a tea light. Someone sets an empty chair on a porch with a blanket over the back, as if a guest had gone to fetch the door. We won't make a spectacle of sorrow. We'll just let the threshold hold it the way thresholds have always done, gently, publicly, without asking for applause. Fourth wall question: what does Halloween prove in a blackout that it can't prove under neon? That safety is not brightness, it's agreement. It's a schedule, a map, a bench, a thermos, a crossing guard who isn't paid and is still right on time. It's a high schooler in grease paint stacking cones with the seriousness of a surgeon. It's a text thread that says, "Go around the tree on Elm, Cocoa at 22 extra pencils, at 31 stop by the firehouse for glow sticks." It's a town that knows how to be one room for a night. And with a composite evening stitched from a dozen true ones. Rain needles the windows like a typewriter that has lost its ribbon. Power hiccups and remembers itself. The gym door opens and warmth walks out to meet the wind cider steam, chalk arrows on polished wood, capes moving like small weather systems. A volunteer with a whistle lifts it, and the room becomes a parade. Back home, a single jack-o'-lantern burns for an hour between squalls, just long enough for a toddler in socks to point and declare, "Pumpin'," with world-altering conviction. Then the flame is pinched with damp fingers, the shade draws, the candle breathes its last tiny sigh and becomes memory. The dark is not the enemy, it turns out. It's the canvas. The plan is the paint. We learn, again, that Halloween is less a night on a calendar than a competence we carry from year to year. Keep watch, keep welcome, share the light you have, and if the sky forgets, how lend it yours. Chapter 6. Razor blades, red herring, the night panic learned to knock. The sidewalk knows the choreography by heart, leaves as confetti, doorbells rehearsed, pumpkins practicing their vowels. It is the late 1960s at first, then the 1970s, The early 80s, a stack of Octobers that smell like plastic masks, damp wool, and the metallic nip of coming frost. And then an idea steps onto the route, wearing a headline like a costume, poisoned candy. Razor blades in apples. A roomer with excellent shoes learns to walk faster than feet. You remember the props, a newscaster's solemn voice, a studio apple held up to the camera, a blade pinched delicately in two fingertips. What if? Parent-teacher association flyers multiply on refrigerator doors like friendly notices that are somehow also alarms. A neighbor says a cousin's friend swears. The story is tidy, in the way real danger rarely is. Let's whisper a fourth wall truth, YouTube safe and necessary. Verified cases were exceedingly rare, often misreported or unrelated to trick or treat. Panic did most of the damage. Rumor did most of the traveling. But fear has its own physics. A single narrative can tilt a block. So the holiday does what it has always done. When uncertainty knocks, it choreographs. The solution is not to cancel October. It is to rehearse it more carefully. Watch A Front Hall in 1978. Coats on hooks like a lineup of small superheroes at rest. A bowl by the door licked shiny by 100 thank yous. On the rug, a parent kneels. This is love's most common posture, and performs the new liturgy of wrappers. Press. Listen for the hiss. Check the crimp. Read the label, as if it were a palm. Apples, the oldest currency of All Hallows, are thanked and quietly diverted to the kitchen to become pie. A child, humming with late-hour electricity, tolerates the delay because inspection has been translated into ritual. This is how we keep the night intact. The dog sits with Monk like patience and believes in the universe of pretzels. Neighborhoods write scripts. Only factory wrapped treats. Don't eat on the route. Stay in groups. Stick to streets that know your name. Adults walk the curb, a perimeter of invisible hands, keeping time with plastic swords and wings. Police departments photocopy maps decorated with clip art pumpkins and suggested loops. Hardware stores put reflective tape within elbow distance of candy. Practical magic. You can stick to a cape. The choreography tightens and somehow becomes more graceful. Less sprint, more attention. The night shifts from improvisation to infrastructure. Schools host harvest nights, a gymnasium humming with squeaky sneakers and sugar-managed glee. Librarians dim the lights and read. Spooky but kind. Tales where the biggest jolt is a whisper before a page turn. Churches and civic clubs invent trunk or treat. A parking lot becomes a roundelay of hatchbacks. Each trunk a tiny stage set, cardboard castle, pirate's chest, moon made of foil. Floodlights make the route a safe loop, and rumor, which dislikes visibility, sulks at the curb. Commerce adapts with speed that would impress a stagehand. Candy companies tighten seals, trumpet, tamper evident. On wrappers that sound like cellophane certificates. Pharmacies tape checklists in the window, hem above shoe, carry a flashlight, tape the cape, look both ways even if you are a vampire. The advice is domestic and unglamorous. exactly where safety likes to live. Dentists host buyback nights and become benevolent traders to their guild, trading chocolate for coins and smiles. And still the rumor walks beside us, sometimes changing masks, rainbow pills in disguise, new ingredients with ominous abbreviations. Each era invents its worry. Each community answers with old muscle memory. Verify, simplify, include. If you've ever wondered what public health looks like when it's charming, it looks like a porch light and a clipboard and a parent with a flag at the corner they bought themselves. Listen to the soundtrack of these years, gentle, precise. The click of a flashlight finding sneakers. The papery crackle of a wrapper becoming a tiny passport stamp. A doorbell that sounds like it's proud of its job. The whisper of a parent saying, "Be careful," with a softness that means "I love you" aggressively. Laughter that returns 2 beats after a startle because the startle was managed, not exploited. Some Octobers do go sideways, and we handle them tenderly. A rare local crime casts a longer shadow than the streetlight can handle. A neighborhood pivots, earlier hours, a shorter route, a year at the gym instead of the sidewalks. A building decides to trick or treat itself floor by floor, a bowl on every landing, an elevator that suddenly believes it's a parade float. Nothing about this looks dramatic on the evening news. Everything about it is civic genius in small rooms. Not all fear comes with malice. Some arrives as mismatch. A porch soundscape that thrills one child unravels another. Communities start posting sound maps, loud on cedar, gentle on birch. The house with the giant spider turns it off for little ones between 6 and 7. Porches add teal pumpkins to signal allergy-safe treats. Some carry blue pails to suggest neurodivergence words optional, joy required. Inclusion ceases to be a special feature. It becomes policy. The rumor shrinks another size because, suddenly, the night has more doors. Let's break the fourth wall and say the quiet thesis, the scariest. Halloweens of this era weren't triumphs of menace. They were stress tests of coordination. Headlines liked the shiver. Neighborhoods mastered the clipboard. If Samhain taught us to carry embers across the dark, these decades taught us to carry checklists with the same reverence. Tape the hem. Circle back for the shy one. Compliment the cardboard robot like you mean it, because someone did engineering on a kitchen floor. Picture a composite evening. Dusk blue. A screen door slaps and apologizes. Pumpkins exhale warm vegetable and candle. A teen in a cape takes the door shift, part penance, part initiation, handing out minis and compliments with actorly sincerity. Epic dragon. Nice cardboard. Spin so I can see the tail. Across the street, a parent sweeps a beam across the curb, pauses at the storm drain, nods to another parent in the quiet semaphore of allies. A patrol car idles like a punctuation mark. A grandparent, leaning on a cane that remembers better weather, whispers to a princess, "You were brave out there," and pins a glow stick on like knighthood. By 9, the bowl is down to a few stubborn strawberry chews that no child truly desires. You will eat them out of principle and nostalgia. On the carpet, a candy geology forms. Trade treaties are negotiated with Roman-level seriousness. Someone lights a votive beside a photograph, because the dead wear October well. Wrappers rustle like a papery rainfall. The porch light clicks off. Far down the block, another porch keeps its light on 2 minutes longer, the way a neighbor keeps conversation alive at the fence. Did the rumor win? Not really. It changed the blocking. It taught us to walk closer, to plan routes, to add reflective tape and common sense, to move the party to the gym when the sky or the headlines say so. It reminded communities that safety is a choreography, not a mood. And it left the essence intact: knock, open, offer, thank, rest. Tomorrow, we'll step into the theater October, haunted houses and hayrides where Bo became a business and still learned to be gentle, where exits glowed green on purpose and actors were trained in empathy as much as timing. But for tonight, accept the humble miracle we practiced. A rumor knocked, and we answered with organization. We met fear with wrappers and maps and compliments, transformed anxiety into tasks, and walked the same old path beneath newer, wiser light. Chapter 7. Stage-managed shadows, haunted houses, hayrides, and the math of mercy. The line begins just beyond the last friendly puddle of streetlight where the grass turns to gravel. The air tastes like hay and fog juice, and the moon pretends not to watch. A teenager in grease paint checks your wristband with the solemnity of a border guard and lifts a velvet rope. Somewhere, a recorded violin saws a note you feel in your ribs. Somewhere else, plywood becomes a Victorian hallway if you don't stare at the seams. A hand-lettered sign announces what you already suspect. Haunted house proceeds for the library roof. This is October's other stage, the place where fright is rehearsed, safety is engineered, and fear puts on its best manners for charity. Haunted attractions didn't replace porch-to-porch ritual. They absorbed its choreography and gave it scenery. The earliest versions were fundraisers in church basements and bank vaults, temporarily repurposed as dungeons with a sense of humor. A ticket felt like civic virtue held between two fingers. You shuffled past sheets hung on fishing line. A fog machine coughed grapes. A future dentist popped from behind a curtain in a lab coat. And a volunteer with impeccable timing popped a balloon just as the room decided to inhale harmless, jubilant chaos that sent you back into the night with a better opinion of your town. Then the form discovered craft. County fairs and theme parks realized October had a second harvest: timing, misdirection, and light. The vocabulary expanded: air cannons that thump like a polite heartbeat under the floor, drop panels that clack open for a half second and close before your brain finishes the word face. Scrim and Pepper's ghost Victorian parlor tricks, turning long corridors into polite hauntings. Scare designers learned the science of the near miss. Bring the startle right up to the skin of harm and stop cleanly every time. A quick fourth wall check: we promised YouTube safe history, so our lens lives on craft and care, not carnage. The scariest thing we'll let you feel is anticipation with an off-ramp. Behind the plywood, rules. Exits that glow, that consider it green, paths wide enough for wheelchairs, staff staged like lifeguards with radios, a quiet room where a mask becomes a smile if you need it. Cast notes read like kindness in stencil font: scare forward, then vanish. Never block egress. No touching. Read the room. Many haunts Adopt safe words, say, "Nope," and a ghoul becomes a docent. Sensory-friendly hours, fewer strobes, softer sound, and kid gloves. In the first hour, so nervous bravery can get its reps. The best actors carry empathy like a second prop. They can spot the kid who needs a peekaboo, the adult who shouldn't lead, the friend who hides behind bravado and will be the first to laugh. Cue lines, once tolerated, become pre-shows. A juggler in skull makeup turns waiting into a dare. A stilt walker leans down just far enough to complement a cape. A roaming storyteller, half folklorist, half uncle, collects local legends and returns them, polished, to their owners, the courthouse light that flickers on windless nights, the covered bridge that whistles in a key no instrument dares. It's all social engineering. Let the crowd bond before the corridors divide them into groups. A haunt with a good cue is a neighborhood in rehearsal. Listen to the toolkit. Sound design does most of the work. You credit to masks, a low-frequency hum that makes the body think about caves, the tick of a metronome that wants to be a footstep, the sudden hush that tells your nervous system a page has turned. Scent machines lace scenes with attic, pine, popcorn, whetstone memories your nose believes even when your eyes don't. Lighting, the most honest liar of them all, carves depth out of plywood, forgives mistakes, gives monsters exits. The scare lives in the beat after a reveal, where a laugh finds you and hands your startle a softer ending. History does its stern work in the background. A tragedy decades ago rewrote codes and consciences. Fire marshals became collaborators, not foils. Professional haunts rebuilt from the studs out, with flame-retardant materials, clearer lines of sight, panic hardware on every door. Charity haunts copied those habits because ethics doesn't care about scale. It's not glamorous, but the most beautiful prop in any maze is the exit sign you don't notice until you need it. Then came a more recent test, the years when the air itself became a question. The industry pivoted like a dancer, timed tickets to unbraid queues, one-direction paths, outdoor trails where trees wore projection-mapped constellations, car haunts that turned parking lots into drive-through plays heard on a low-power FM station. Masks, already a costume staple, learned a medical dialect. Actors reblocked scenes to startle with shadow and distance. It turned out you could scare beautifully without breath sharing a zip code. Meanwhile, the humble hayride kept doing the world's gentlest haunted magic. A wagon's slow geometry. A field turned to theater by lanterns strung too high to be useful. A fiddle somewhere convincing the dark to keep time. You can feel every plank of the wagon floor. You can hear whatever the wind meant by passing through corn. Scenes appear like comic book panels, a barn silhouette, a scarecrow that isn't, a window that blinks. The fear isn't of harm, it's of story you cannot quite finish before the wagon turns and the next one begins. Home haunters, engineers by day, fog magicians by night bring Imagineering to cul-de-sacs. PVC becomes pirate ships. Thrifted motors teach skeletons to wave with a modesty that makes you want to wave back. Driveway projectors convince garage doors to breathe. It's neighborly R&D. A whole microeconomy wakes for a month. Bail deliveries, fog fluid tracked like weather, seamstresses rescuing a cape at 4 p.m. So a 7-year-old can be valiant by 7. The headline writes itself, Community Finances Joy. What, then, is the scariest Halloween? In this chapter's ledger, not the nights that went too far. The scariest is any night that forgets the math, that startle without reset becomes stress, that darkness without exits becomes danger, that surprise without consent becomes harm. The opposite, fright with mercy built in, is one of civilization's quietest triumphs. A good haunt lets you practice leaving a dark place with your dignity. Let's walk one gently. The host counts your group softly. 3, 4, 5 to go. And you feel taken care of before the door even swings. A corridor of portraits exhales dust. A frame blinks once, apologetically, as if embarrassed to be alive. A whoosh of air finds your calves. Your laugh finds you. A masked figure leans just far enough to say, "Nice shoes," which is startling only because it's kind. In the strobe room, a grandmother grips your elbow and declares, "I paid $5 and I'm getting all 5. And the ghouls, artists to the last, give her a wider aisle and a bow. Then pumpkin light rows of carved faces, the air sweet and vegetal, a reset beat that tells your heart it may take its coat off. The exit glows green. The midway smells like cider. A merch table sells nothing but memories disguised as t-shirts. You step into the ordinary, dark feeling larger, not smaller. Break the fourth wall with me for one last question. Why do we buy a ticket to be scared when life already offers fright for free? Because here, fear is borrowed and returned on time. Because this corridor has a map. Because we want to practice being brave in a story that has rules, so that on nights without scenery we remember how to find the exit sign. Haunted houses, hayrides, pumpkin trails, they're all rehearsal rooms for courage with supervision. When you leave, a teenager in black t-shirt stacks traffic cones with surgeonly focus. A parent thanks the ticket taker as if gratitude were a password. A manager whispers into a radio. Hold house, reset, open. And a line of strangers becomes a group. The moon minds its own business, but because we've all behaved, lends some of it to ours. The porch republic waits at the far edge of the gravel. We'll go back there, next, back to doorbells and neighborhoods, to the years when real danger tried to lease October and the porches politely rewrote the contract. For now, keep tonight's lesson pocket warm. Fear can be engineered to leave you safer than it found you. That isn't a paradox. That's Halloween's thesis, 2,000 years old. Now, with fog machines, we meet the unknown together, inside a plan. Chapter 8. The Republic of Porches. At the hour when the sun loosens its grip and the sky decides between lavender and ink, a neighborhood performs a quiet miracle. Private houses become public rooms. A porch light, yours, mine, the one with the creaky chain, stops being mere illumination and starts operating as a signal. Yes, knock here. Yes, we're playing. Yes, we will be kind on schedule. By the time the first shoes slap the sidewalk, the block has transformed into a parliament of thresholds. each step an embassy with a bowl for a seal and a compliment for a constitution. Preparation is choreography disguised as pottering. A hand tapes a paper moon to a rail, another twists a bulb tighter. Someone explains to a nervous skeleton dog that it is, in fact, very brave. Indoors, a parent lines a mixing bowl with a cloth napkin like a ceremonial robe, pours in fun-size rustles, and for one private second breathes the caramel and corn haze that says October is on. Across the street, a neighbor checks the sight lines from door to curb. Is the step clear? Is the mat flat? Is the jack-o'-lantern far enough from the curtain to be only story, never incident? These small audits, unphotogenic, unheroic, are how civilization gets its hair combed before company. Then the signals bloom. 1 porch light. 2. 10. The pool of safe gold hopscotches down the block until the street reads like a liturgy. Yes, 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 yes. In a windowsill, a teal pumpkin, quietly radical in its understatement, declares allergy-friendly options, stickers, glow rings, pencils that will outlast their sugar cousins and carry bats to math class. Next door, a printed card with a blue pumpkin says words optional, eye contact optional, joy required translation services for children whose nerves prefer syntax without syllables. At the corner, a handwritten placard, quiet hour 6-7, turns a lawn into sanctuary for the small, the sensitive, the overwhelmed. This is policy without a podium. Feet arrive in handfuls, a witch with a hat too serious for her height, a cardboard robot with hinges that squeak like good manners, a dinosaur learning the physics of tail management. Parents hover at a distance calibrated by love, close enough for rescue, far enough for ownership. A teen volunteer cape traded for reflective vest plays, crossing guard, lifting a paddle like a benign wand, and discovering a delicious superpower. Cars behave when someone asks them to with confidence and a neon disc. Breaking the fourth wall with you for a breath, on a platform that loves spectacle. Remember that this is the show, an adolescent holding back 2 lanes with the authority of kindness. Doorways take up their ancestral office. Knock. Open. Admire. Exchange. Blessing in the dialect of nice tailspin for the court. Little economies flourish. The house with the gel pens becomes a pilgrimage site. The porch with bubbles buys 5 extra minutes for a child who needs a reset beat before the next door. Compliments move faster than sugar. Epic scales. Your cardboard engineering department deserves a raise. That cloak twirls like a weather system. You can hear nerves unknot at the sound of being seen. A republic needs maps. On a lamppost, a printout with cartoon pumpkins and arrows, the loop drawn to fit short legs and new stamina. In someone's pocket, a folded list, maple, birch, library steps rendezvous, cocoa at 22, the skeleton quartet tuning at 31. On a phone, a group text humming like a hive, avoid the puddle by #12. Quiet stop at #14 is on. Need safety pin. We've got a kit at the corner bench. Technology doesn't replace the knock, it pre-wires the welcome. One flame to many, one message to many. Bonfire logic in pixels. Look at the rolls surface from ordinary faces. There's the door captain, a grandparent with the calm of a harbor, who keeps the bowl, the line, and the praise flowing at exactly the same speed. The runner, a teenager with long strides and longer patience, varying refills from kitchen to step with the elegant timing of a stagehand. The bench acolyte, who tends the rest bench, a thrifted garden seat newly throned with paper cups of water and 5 varieties of sticker for miraculous morale raises. The glow distributor, who clips tiny LEDs to zippers with the serenity of a monk illuminating manuscripts. None of them signed up. All of them arrived exactly on time. Where? Scary. Tries to creep in, the Republic answers with practice. A shoelace loses ambition. A grown-up kneels with a speed that would shame a pit crew. A toddler's cape drags. A safety pin appears like a plot twist that improves the third act. A dog costumed beyond dignity finds a cat opinionated about municipal boundaries. The crossing guard smiles and opens a corridor. The animals pass like weather fronts exchanging pleasantries. A skateboard finds a wet leaf, and gravity declares itself. 2 porch sitters rise in mirror motion, checking knees, purveying assurance, applying the ancient salve of, "You're all right. Also, your cape is magnificent." Mischief is licensed, gently. A group of middle schoolers, faces painted, laughter in the register that means we're benignly feral, collectively relocate the lightweight ghost from one yard to the next, while its owner looks out, raises an eyebrow, and mouths, "Nice try." Inversion spent wisely oils, gears that would grind, if never turned. A community that never lets children rearrange the furniture a little will eventually find the sofa bolted to the floor, and the joy with it. The sensory orchestra of the Republic is expertly tuned. Porch music is staggered. One house takes the playlist impulse and becomes Avenue DJ. The next 2 practice restraint, offering only lantern hum and the percussion of laughter. Fog machines consult the calendar. Full drama later, ASMR for toddler hour. Wind catches a paper garland and adds whisper to the score. Dryer vents contribute that repentant sweetness of warm cotton. Pumpkins give off their faint vegetal perfume, a smell that feels like a low note of safety. If you've ever wondered what community smells like, it's cinnamon over asphalt. Inside houses, the ritual audit continues. Wrappers become a gentle rain in a living room, where the dump candy as geology spreads into tributaries labeled tradable, parent tax, things we will pretend to love out loud. Inspection is a love language. Press, listen, check, explain. Apples migrate to the kitchen for pie. Pomona doesn't mind the reroute. Pencils and stickers go in the pencil cup with the gravity of trophies. A child practices the other half of the transaction, thank you, until it stops being a rule and starts being a habit. Equity is policy here. The teal bowl. The blue bucket. The quiet stop. The house that posts. Wheelchair, ramp, around side knock loud. We'll meet you there. And then, actually meets you there. The driveway chalk that opens a lane where stroller wheels and little legs can pass without negotiating with lawn ornaments. This is inclusion without banners. Every tiny accommodation, a constitutional amendment ratified by practice. There are micro-dramas, resolved as case studies. Exhibit A. Rain arrives early, auditioning for tragedy. The Republic convenes in 10 text messages. Shift to the lobby. In 30 minutes, a building becomes a vertical block party. 6 floors, 6 bowls, an elevator that believes it's a hayride, a super who tapes restroom beside a little hand-drawn ghost. Exhibit B. A rumor strides down the thread with boots on. Don't go to the corner by the park. A neighbor with a name and a calm voice posts the correction, the source, the plan B. The crowd moves like water following a well-placed stone. The splash never makes a headline. Exhibit C. The bowl empties early. The neighbor across the street performs the ritual of the secret. Refill their own bag poured into yours while you're inside complimenting a cardboard dragon, because reciprocity is the currency that never devalues. And yes, commerce attends the session, but it keeps its hat in its hands. The hardware store that posted LED tea lights near the door earns a dozen thank yous and 1 folkloric status upgrade. The bakery down the block sells miniature loaves stamped with a pumpkin, tasting exactly like October taught flour to remember. A maker on the corner offers capes cut to fit over winter coats because aesthetics should not wage war on warmth. Dollars, nudged by neighborhood threads, find their way to neighbors. There is a place for memory at the Republic's table. A photograph in a window with a tea light beside it. An extra chair on a stoop, a blanket folded over its back, as if a late guest had stepped inside for a moment and will be right out. We keep this camera gentle. We refuse spectacle. We let you feel how a threshold holds absence without making a show of it. The oldest business of the evening, say the names, continues in miniature between knocks. You may notice the off switches flick on and off, like punctuation. A porch finishes and goes dark, not a rebuff, a benediction enough for tonight. See you next year. The big spider on maple nods to the quiet hour. The band on oak has a set list with rests. Boundaries are part of hospitality. They tell the night where to shine most kindly. Let's step through a composite route, detail turned up, danger dialed down. The screen door taps and apologizes. Feet on concrete make the soft syllables of a well-read poem. Rain has a personality. Early in the evening, it's a gossip, tapping everything for attention. Later, it's a negotiator, offering periods and commas. The porch republic answers with the tools of minor miracles. a towel spread like a welcome mat at the threshold's edge, a basket of cheap ponchos that make children look like benevolent lanterns, a parent's hand brisk on a child's hair, converting wet into order. Costumes adjust with a competence that deserves applause. A fairy layers and becomes the winter court. A robot discovers mittens and calls it version 2.0. A dinosaur accepts a knit hat, and suddenly, the Pleistocene feels cozy. Wind is trickier, a comedian who doesn't always land the joke. In yards, light ghosts attempt escape. Adults step neatly on their hems and become briefly the patron saints of ballast. A 12-foot skeleton learns humility. The zip ties holding the tibia accept a promotion. On the sidewalk, the crossing guard's paddle tilts 15 degrees into the gust and becomes a spell for car obedience. If a foam tombstone tumbles toward slapstick, a volunteer catches it with the gravitas of a librarian rescuing a first edition. In the stories told later, the scare is already softened. The punchline arrives wearing reflective tape. Then there is Ice, that cousin who RSVPs, perhaps, and shows up with a grin that means trouble. The sidewalk becomes philosophy. Every step asks for an argument. Halloween, to its credit, does not pretend physics is negotiable. Routes shrink to the block you can supervise with a glance. A neighbor with an orange vest stands in as a human handrail. Battery tea lights replace real fire on stoops. Stairs wear sand with the ceremonial seriousness of a sash. A toddler in a batsuit goes down on that extremely padded diaper no harm. A brief insult to dignity then rises to applause, knighted with a glow stick for bravery. If fear came to make a scene, competence steals it with slapstick and kindness. Sometimes weather doesn't ask, it declares. Power blinks and forgets itself. The street is reimagined as an outline. The doorbell stops being a sound and becomes a memory your finger remembers anyway. You hear the neighborhood more clearly in the hush, the rubber hush of shoes in a stairwell, the umph of a folding table opening into purpose, the squeegee's baritone as someone clears the entry mat so capes don't slip. Candles and pumpkins are pinched with damp fingers. On the sill, LED tea lights blink into their patient, citrus glow. The house smells suddenly of matches, cinnamon, and the idea of responsibility. The night goes on because the night was never in the wires, it was in the agreement. Case study, stitched from a dozen true Octobers and kept YouTube gentle all day. The forecast flirted. At 5, it committed. The PTA text thread flips from jokes to choreography. Shift to gym at 6. One-way loop. Quiet corner by the paper moon. Cocoa at table 3. Bubbles and stickers for resets. By 5:30, the stage is up. Crepe paper arcs like a small aurora. Duct tape lays lanes with a confidence that would impress a highway department. A custodian wheels out the earthenware urn and becomes monarch of steam and patience. A librarian sets a basket of "You were brave" indoors. Stickers near the exit. Children wear them with an earnestness that could power a city block. By the time the rain decides to audition for a biography, the parade is already a rhythm on varnished wood. Nobody mourns the street. The gym is beautiful in a way the street cannot be. Hurricanes and named storms ask larger questions, and the holiday answers the way villages always have, by changing the date without breaking the promise. City Hall posts an official rain date with the gravity of a bell. Neighborhoods post it again with emojis that make children believe schedules are made of candy. When the alternative Saturday arrives, blue sky crisp. As paper, the pumpkins are slouchier, which is adorable. The capes are wrinkled in a way that says, "We survived minor drama," which is very on brand for childhood. The compliments are the same, so the ritual is the same. Weather can reschedule, it cannot rewrite the script. Snow, which really should mind its calendar, has a showman's instinct. There is a Midwestern memory, locked in 1,000 kitchens of bags, filled with snow faster than candy, of pumpkins powdered like cupcakes, of porch lights wearing halos. The pivot is almost jaunty, route shortened, toddlers carried, hot chocolate smuggled into travel mugs like contraband kindness. Later, there will be photographs, a witch's hat frosted like a confectioner's dream, a dragon's tail printing hieroglyphs in the drift, a line of boot prints that reads like a sentence about courage written by small authors with big pens. If you want to know how communities teach resilience, eavesdrop in those kitchens. You were brave, the snow was showing off, let's trade 2 peppermints for that gummy eyeball. There are micro-innovations weather loves to provoke. The candy chute length of PVC, angle calculated, the receiving bucket placed with the ceremony of a telescope, whooshes chocolate into a pail with a shh that delights the body without alarming the mind. A porch installs a clothesline between columns and clips, little goodie bags at beak height for crows who happen to be children. A small hand reaches, unclips, and the world feels briefly frictionless. Umbrellas join the costume economy with comic effect. A pirate becomes a parasol captain. A vampire discovers that red looks excellent under clear plastic. A robot learns perimeter defense. The motto of Weathered Halloween is carved on a pumpkin somewhere. Adjust, don't abandon. Because we promise to be kind to your nerves, we'll keep the rougher stories small and true. The branch that came down where a stroller would have been if the crossing guard hadn't waved the group across a beat earlier. The puddle that disguised itself as a mirror and tried to keep a boot, only to be foiled by Velcro and laughter. The inflatable dragon that developed wanderlust and was retrieved from a neighbor's hedge with the tenderness of a pet intervention. Weather likes to pretend it writes the plot. Communities prefer editing. There is also the quiet matter of inclusion, which weather, oddly, assists. When wind silences speakers and rain dims strobes, neighborhoods find themselves speaking softer, hand signals, warm eye contact, a slower pace that suits smaller legs and more nervous systems than anyone realized. Sensory-friendly hour stops being a feature and becomes a temperature the whole street can feel and honor. Teal pumpkins glow a little brighter in the gloom, not as novelty, but as navigation. A blue bucket is easier to see against a gray sky. Its meaning travels farther. Accessibility, which is hospitality with a plan, becomes the night's most fashionable accessory. We should talk about the smell of it, because memory does. Petrichor rises from the sidewalk like a hymn that remembers when water met dust for the first time. Wet wool, honest and barn-like, invents a nostalgia you didn't know you had. Pumpkin plus rain equals a vegetable perfume that says safe in a language so old the brain doesn't bother to translate. Somewhere, drier vents contribute their penitential sweetness. At the corner, a bakery propped open for emergency brownies releases a chocolate baritone that makes even the wind consider buying a slice. If terror wanted to take the lead, smell steals the scene with gentleness. Do porches ever call it? Yes, with mercy. The light clicks off early in windows that would like to keep glass and goodwill intact. A handwritten note on the bowl reads, "Take 2, see you next year," and small hands obey as if the paper itself were municipal law. A parade route loses a block and gains a bench. Nobody publishes a complaint. The bench becomes a place where compliments decelerate into conversation. Boundaries are not defeats, they are architecture. Weather merely reveals where the load-bearing walls belong. One last composite, more detailed than any we deserve. The sky has decided to drizzle for character. The chalk arrows on the sidewalk have learned to bloom at the edges like watercolor. The crossing guard hums a harmony to the Bluetooth speaker's melody because the wind keeps stealing the chorus. A parent kneels in the lee of a porch column to retie a lace. The child puts a hand on the adult's shoulder because that is how balance is borrowed. A neighbor emerges with a towel warmed in the dryer, luxury disguised as hospitality, and receives from a small pirate a thank you of such theater that the towel becomes a relic. Inside the gym, the custodian sweeps a constellation of leaves that somehow tracked in anyway. The room applauds the clean floor, though no one says out loud that's what the clapping is for. At the firehouse, a firefighter bends to eye level and says to a witch, "You flying or walking tonight?" And the witch, who is 6 and serious, says, "Both." And the firefighter nods, as if a flight plan has been filed. When the weather finally remembers its manners, and the last group turns for home, you can hear the neighborhood exhale. Porches pinch flames with damp fingers. Pumpkins make their tiny sigh and lean inward, content to become memory by morning. The street smells like wet leaves and the end of a good book. In kitchens, damp capes become tents over chairbacks. Bowls of candy become municipal budgets. Under review, Coco does the work of public relations. Someone checks the forecast for tomorrow and grins as if surprised the future still exists. It does. It always did. Let's end with the thesis that the sky, for all its theater, cannot rewrite. Weather is a mask, not a mandate. It can change the color of the night and the tempo of the route. It cannot change the verbs. We still open, offer, escort, praise, rest. We move the lantern from porch to gym, from curb to lobby, from Saturday to Sunday, and the flame does not mind. If you need a definition of resilience that fits on a wrapper, here it is, breaking the fourth wall to hand it to you. Meet the unknown together, inside a plan, and bring a towel. Chapter 10. The Digital Lantern. At some point, the candle learned to ping. The same 5 heirloom verbs, open, offer, praise, escort, rest, still run the night. But now they travel through the air first and land in glass. A porch light is a signal. A notification is a preview of that signal. An ember that jumps house to house before dusk. The block begins its transformation, not with a match, but with a buzz in a pocket, the soft glow of a screen, the printer's sigh as it pushes out a route map speckled with cartoon pumpkins. If the old bonfire drew a village with flame, the modern night sketches its outline in pixels and then fills it with footsteps. The first sensation is haptic. A group chat, politely on mute all year, clears its October throat. Hours, 5:08. Quiet, hour, 6:07, on Birch. Teal treats, at #14. Crossing flag volunteers, sign up here. The message lands like warm butter on a plan you were already making. Screenshots of last year's route surface from the collective drawer. A parent posts a color-coded map, orange dots for lights on, teal for allergy-friendly bowls, purple moons for sensory-low stops. You can smell the toner before the paper cools. The map is ridiculous and perfect, folds like a prayer, and knows where the puddle usually forms by #12. Playlists begin their migration. A teenager curates porch music with the seriousness of a dramaturg. No scream loops, yes to vintage radio dramas, and minor key lullabies, a soft landing mix for toddler hour labeled "Don't Scare the Baby Bat." A Bluetooth speaker coughs to life and remembers a song that always makes the neighborhood walk a half-step taller. Somewhere, a 12-foot skeleton's jaw sinks to a baritone that absolutely didn't come with the instruction manual. If sound once traveled only by wind, now it arrives with intent tempo for kindness. The digital lantern's favorite magic trick is turning coordination into comfort. A sign-up sheet sprouts for crossing guards. Names populate it like stars deciding to be a constellation. A QR code on the library's door points to a story walk. Scan here, follow the paper moons through the stacks. Hear a whisper reading about a ghost who prefers tea to haunting. The park posts entry windows to keep the trunk or treat loop breathable. The rec center overlays accessibility notes on its little map. Curb cuts here, ramp there, quiet bench under the maple. There's nothing cinematic about any of this. That's the point. The scariest Halloweens never needed special effects. They needed good UX. Doorbells went to night school too. A porch cam is not a sentinel so much as a memory keeper. Parents replay the tiny bow of a shy ghost who forgot the joke and said, "Thank you." Anyway, a neighbor edits a highlight reel titled, "Best Compliments, 7/8p. Meows," and sends it to the block with a disclaimer you can feel even if it isn't typed. Share kindness, guard privacy. Fourth wall glance will keep this YouTube gentle, no naming, no shaming, only the kind of footage that reminds a tired world it once had manners. The digital lantern excels at smoothing edges. A roomer strides into the thread, wearing boots, avoid the park corner, and is met by a pin from someone with a name and a role, checked with Officer Lee, all clear. But we're shifting the toddler loop to the library side regardless. Map updated. The panic that would have chewed through a dozen porches dissolves into Plan B. That's the new choreography. Not louder, but faster at the right moments, with receipts. And then there are the inventions that feel like folklore in beta. House #22 tapes, a QR code to the railing. A scan opens a thank you wall where kids tap hearts on favorite stops. Data? Sure. Blessing? Obviously. The Museum Plaza hosts AR pumpkins that appear in your camera like tame meteors. The last one turns into instructions for the world's kindest scavenger hunt. Find a teal porch, wave with your whole arm, collect 3 compliments, leave 1 behind. The firehouse posts, live, bay open. Hours. Its headlights serve as a neighborhood moon. The PTA schedules. Kid gloves. Trick or treat slots in half-hour blocks so nerves can stretch and settle. The night begins. The map printed and glowing doesn't replace the knock, it prepares it. A crossing volunteer cape, swapped for reflective vest, raises a paddle like a wand and discovers the ancient sorcery of traffic behaving when asked kindly. Chalk arrows, planned in a dock and perfected by a teenager with an eye for wayfinding, led small feet, like dotted lines in a picture book. A porch, with a blue bucket icon on the map, turns its sound down, its smile up, its eye contact gentle. A child who doesn't have words has routes anyway. This is what inclusion looks like in pixels. Translation before arrival. The sensory score is carefully mixed. One house streams string quartets, reimagining lullabies. Next door runs a loop of soft wind and distant chimes. Farther along, an old radio drama whispers about a mystery solved by noticing. The fog machine has a schedule posted in the thread: full drama after 7:30 ASMR, fog before. A porch posted earlier, lighting at 30% during quiet hour, strobe off all night. The comments under that post read like a civic choir: thank you, heart, bad emoji, we'll copy this next year. Digital tools handle logistics like a stage manager with the right headset. A wagon wheel sulks 2 houses over. Someone asks, need a hex key? And 3 show up because it's always the 4th size you didn't bring. A cape betrays its wearer. A neighbor with a safety kit, announced at noon in the thread, arrives with pins and a sentence that knits dignity back together. You're perfect. Hold still 1 second there. A toddler meltdown requires a reset. The map has a bubble station marked as if joy were infrastructure. It is. The smallest problems become excuses for competence to be seen. Privacy sits at the table with the same seriousness as candy. The porch cam posts are opt-in, faces blur by habit. The thread's pinned note says what the neighborhood has already agreed to: shared delight, not details. Ask before posting other people's kids. The digital lantern, when it shines too bright, learns to dim itself. The measure of a good night isn't reach, it's return everyone home, spirits high, nothing turned into content that should have stayed a conversation. In this republic, commerce keeps its hat in its hands. Yes, the algorithm hawks fog machines and instant capes. But the posts that earn real affection are local. A maker on the corner selling bat wings sized to fit over winter coats, beauty that doesn't wage war on warmth, hardware store pinning LED tea lights at the register curtains thank you, the bakery offering mini loaves stamped with pumpkins. Nostalgia, sliced. Digital doesn't replace the knock, it points your dollars toward neighbors. When weather plays costume designer, the digital lantern becomes a dispatch desk. Radar screenshots slide into the chat, followed by calm choreography. Start at 5. Gym pivot if thunder. Firehouse bay open, map updated. By late afternoon, the PTAs link prints into a floor plan. By 6, string lights sketch a horizon inside the gym. By 7, a custodian monarch of the dust mop gets a round of applause in the comment thread for the shine under small feet. The sticker at the exit says, "You were brave indoors," and the photo album collects 100 proud chests, each with a glow ring beating like a second heart. There are mistakes, and the medium helps correct them without scolding. A yard streams too much. Scream. The comments model the tone that keeps October civilized. Love the decor. Any chance to turn it down 6, 7? Quiet hour for little ones. The post earns a thumbs up, the volume dips, and the thread logs another invisible referendum on how to share air. A poorly phrased rumor gets outweighed by 3 posts with names, times, sources, and a map pin. Panic loses to receipts. Meanwhile, the best invention of the season is also the humblest, micro-volunteering that lives in a sign-up block. 20 slots of 15 minutes each, crossing guard at Maple, bubble wrangler at Quiet Stop, cocoa runner at the corner bench, glow clipper on Zipper Patrol. You claim one from your phone while spooning applesauce into a small vampire, and for exactly a quarter of an hour you become infrastructure. The night has always depended on such people. Now it can find them in advance. Listen to the ambient track of the digital age, October, rendered safely for the softest nerves. The single buzz of a message that reads home safe, the spray of a chalk line completing an arrow, the click of a clip on light finding a zipper, the tiny roar of a printer finishing a map that someone will fold 4 times and carry like a talisman, the papery hush of wrappers as they become municipal budgeting on the living room rug, the soft clap as a thread fills with thank yous, to the teen at the corner, to librarian with the QR ghosts, to the firefighter who bent to eye level, to the neighbor who set out a blue bucket and a sign that said words optional, joy required. Break the fourth wall with me for a thesis that fits on a wrapper. The screen is not the party, it's the invitation, the route map, the dimmer switch, and sometimes the flashlight you lend to someone who forgot theirs. The danger with digital has always been volume. The trick is mixing turn-up information, turn-down panic, leave room for mystery. The knock still lands on wood. The compliment still leaves one person a fraction taller. The door still makes that click you will remember in April. The digital lantern just makes sure the right people are at the right doors at the right time, with room to breathe. Night deepens. The map's orange dots dim one by one, like a planetarium closing kindly. Phones pile on the dresser, buzzing themselves to sleep. The thread, like a campfire, shifts from planning to gratitude. Lost glove, found at 31. Hot chocolate MVP, Maya. Shout out to the kid who said, "Our house smelled like cinnamon." Porch cams capture one last wave blurred enough to be universal, specific enough to make your ribs warm and then blink to black. On the stoop, a jack-o'-lantern holds its ember for another minute and gives that familiar tiny sigh as smoke writes cursive in the porch light. Tomorrow, the map will archive, the compliments will not. The playlists will slide back into folders. The muscle memory will stay on your block's bones. And the next time the unknown knocks, and it will, in a season that has nothing to do with costumes, you'll have proof you can meet it together, inside a plan. The candle still matters. The app just helped you carry it farther. Chapter 11. The Edge of the Candle. The phrase, "the scariest Halloween," suggests spectacle sirens and headlines and a moon rehearsing its villain laugh. But if you ask neighborhoods, the actual experts, what truly raised their pulse, they'll give you quieter inventory. A moment when a child was briefly out of sight, a parade float that stalled at the wrong corner, a wind that took liberties with a power line. A rumor that arrived faster than correction. The night didn't shatter. It wavered, and then the choreography steadied it. This chapter is a ledger of those edges, told gently, the way you tell a story that taught you something you use every year. Begin with the simplest fear, misplacement. Every parent has felt the split second where a cape you were just looking at becomes a crowd. Every child has been the cape that realized the hand it was holding belonged to a different sleeve. The fix is older than apps and smarter than panic. Rendezvous points and call and response. A school posts a sign on the gym door. If you lose your people, find the paper moon. A parade prints a color on the back of every number. Blue group meets at the library steps. In living rooms, families practice a phone whisper. If we get separated, go to the pumpkin with the tall hat. Most lost in October becomes found in under 2 minutes. The lesson lingers for a lifetime. Fear can be organized. Now the near miss that felt big because it leaned on machinery. A generator hiccups on a float. Lights flicker. For one beat, the street inhales. Then the band behind the float keeps time, a cappella. The chaperones make a corridor with their palms. The driver kills the engine, and a line of neighbors pushes the world 5 yards forward while the crowd applauds competence. No headline follows. The photograph shows smiles wider than relief. The invisible caption reads, "We practiced exits before we needed them." Animals visit the story. Not the cinematic kind, just a coyote that forgot the schedule, or a deer that thinks a cul-de-sac is a creek. The Porch Republic does not dramatize. Lights brighten. Roots bend. A neighbor, 3 houses down, becomes a flag and a smile. This way, friends. Someone texts the block thread. Someone else texts animal control with the diction of a person ordering a pizza. The animal makes its own exit. The children get a story with the edges sanded down. the adults discover that adrenaline can be metabolized by laughter and cocoa. Weather has its own chapter in this book, but it deserves a cameo here at the edge. A gust lifts a prop in a yard and tries to turn a ghost into a kite. A volunteer steps neatly on the base and becomes briefly the patron saint of ballast. A string of lights goes dark on a busy sidewalk. A teenager reaches into a tote and produces clip on LEDs like a stage magician who knows the trick is preparation. The scariest. Weather nights are often, in hindsight, portfolios of modest saves that read like the world complimenting itself. There's the rumor year, too, the one you remember because your lungs learned a new syllable. The group text pinged. Someone said, "Don't," at a particular corner. Someone else said, "Why?" The reply took minutes that lasted a season. An explanation, a correction, a verified update from a person with a name you know and a voice you trust. The block adjusted. The night moved to the gym. Children compared capes under fluorescent light, and the world did not end. It learned the old-fashioned skill of changing plans without breaking hearts. If you prefer a montage, here it is. YouTube soft, close on hands and faces. A safety pin appears, and a witch hat learns about wind. A glow stick becomes a medal when a small astronaut braves the dark, 5 houses at a time, with a buddy and a plan. A crossing flag in a volunteer's palm earns a courtesy from 2 lanes of traffic that might have forgotten courtesy existed. A clipboard with a route map and 3 check marks makes one adult stand an inch taller. A thermos lid unscrews and becomes a bell that rings. You're fine. We should talk about the no's, because they, too, are part of keeping a promise. Halloween is generous, not infinite. A porch shuts its light and means rest. A house pauses its soundscape for the quiet hour and means welcome to those who need it. A neighborhood says, "No strobe on birch." And the big spider on maple nods, as if mechanical spiders had etiquette on the 1st of November. The homeowner swears they do. The scariest nights are often ones where boundaries had to be drawn on short notice. The loveliest mornings are the ones when the whole block thanked the person who drew them. There are case studies you won't see on a map because they played out on a doormat. A parent knocked and asked to use a bathroom for a small emergency. The answer was yes, and no one died of embarrassment. A child's costume tore, and a stranger with a sewing kit on a lanyard, yes, really said, "I've been waiting for this," and performed a small surgery to applause. A kid who didn't have words held up a blue bucket. The adult at the door understood and produced a glow ring like a magician who believes in translation. None of this makes a headline. All of this is what the holiday is for. There are also the Octobers we contradict with policy because the old lore gets it wrong or unkind. Black cats don't need superstition. They need homes and gentle handling. Shelters that once shut adoptions now run screened, careful placements. Come back in November if your interest sounds like a prop. Come today if your interest sounds like a family. The real fright is the idea that a story about luck can outweigh kindness. The cure is procedure warmed by welcome. Pause with me for a fourth wall question we've been circling for chapters. What is fear's job in a healthy Halloween? Not domination. Not denial. Calibration. Fear sharpened to attention, steady enough to notice a curb, humble enough to accept a hand, social enough to become teamwork at the first. Oops. The scariest Halloweens fail this math. The good ones ace it without looking like they studied. We promised gentle history, so even the rougher case notes stay kind. There was a year when the ambulance came and left empty because someone fainted, then rose, then waved sheepishly and took the water and the bench and the applause. A year when a park path got closed and the detour turned out prettier, with fewer acorns underfoot and more streetlight on the maple. A year when an elevator in an apartment parade needed 30 minutes to remember its purpose, and an entire building discovered that stairs can be a party if adults carry the pails. What do we keep, then, from this ledger of edges? A kit you could write on the back of a candy wrapper. Name a meeting place. Practice the if we're separated sentence. Walk the route in daylight. Mark the curb with your brain. Carry the pin, the light, the tape. Compliment first. Correct kindly. Thank loudly. Honor the off switch for porches, for props, for people. This is not romance. It's craft. Which is perhaps the thesis Halloween has been whispering since Salmon. Make a plan, light the lights you can carry, give fear something to do that ends in a job well done. One last edge, then we'll step into the closing chapter. The night is thinning. The bowl is empty, but for the universal strawberry chews of last resort. A last cluster of capes and cardboard rounds the corner like a small constellation, deciding whether to persist. Across the street, someone dims a yard dragon with a tenderness you don't expect for plastic. Inside, the trade economy settles its accounts: 2 caramels for a gummy eye, 3 chews for a pencil decorated with bats and peace, descends with the mathematical satisfaction of fairness. A votive by a photograph turns the room into a promise. The jack-o'-lantern makes its tiny sigh and becomes story. Tomorrow, we'll gather the threads: bonfire to porch light, soul cake to fun size, blackout to battery tea light, and ask why we keep doing this, gently, at the edge of the year. Spoiler from the narrator, breaking the wall with a smile, because love looks good in orange, and because a community that can choreograph delight in the dark can choreograph almost anything. Chapter 12. After the sigh, what we keep when the candle goes out. When the porch lights click off and the street remembers it is only a street, Halloween doesn't end, it settles. The jack-o'-lantern gives that last tiny breath: smoke and sugar and warm vegetable, and then the dark folds over the neighborhood like a good blanket. Inside, wrappers hush into a plastic autumn. Capes are laid over chairbacks like flags on small ships in harbor. If you listen closely, and you should, our whole series has been an exercise in good listening. You'll hear what remains. Not screams, not even laughter, but the soft machinery of a ritual putting itself away without losing any of its parts. This chapter is about that residue, the why that persists when the orange has been boxed and the spider has been unstrung. What do we keep when the candle goes out? More than you think. First, we keep the grammar. The oldest verbs of the night: open, offer, praise, protect, do not belong to October. They are loaned to it for practice. Tomorrow, they'll go back to the shift they work year-round, the nurse's late knock on a 6A. Ma'am, why doors? Door, the crossing guard's raised palm at noon, the neighbor's spare key under the stone that looks like a frog. Halloween is a rehearsal with better lighting. The door you open tonight has muscle memory now. It will open more easily in February when a stranger needs jumper cables and a kind sentence. We keep, too, the map, the literal route in a child's feet, and the metaphorical one in a community's head. We walked together under a set of improvised rules and discovered that ordinary ground becomes infrastructure when people agree. Chalk arrows and clip-on LEDs can be unmade. The knowledge that a block can self-organize cannot. A town that can route capes around a fallen branch can route lunches to the house with a flu, can route attention to the corner where the curb is unforgiving. You didn't just decorate, you trained. There's the matter of names. All Hallows taught us to say them. The Porch Republic taught us to overhear them kindly. A child learned a dozen new names tonight, pets and pumpkins, and the neighbors formerly known as that house. And we'll greet them in the grocery aisle next week with a confidence earned on the sidewalk. A grown-up spoke an older name beside a photograph on the mantel and refitted the present to the past with one match's worth of light. Break the fourth wall with me for a beat, we promised YouTube safe history. But this is the one place I refuse to sand the edge. Memory is what keeps the scary from being empty. A name in a room is insulation. We keep the kit. The tape, the pin, the spare battery, the route map folded into a pocket Bible of common sense. These are props for October, that moonlight, as tools for life. If you have ever watched a volunteer conjure a safety pin at the exact second a costume forgot its job, you have seen the domestic version of heroism. It scales. The next time a plan stumbles, someone will reach for the tote without drama, and civilization will once again be rescued by a bag that looks suspiciously like it came from a craft store. We keep the comedy because fear needs a foil, and nothing breaks it faster than a small, well-placed joke. The vampire who tripped over the curb and bowed as if he'd meant to. The dinosaur who said, "Roar," at a bewildered squirrel. The toddler who called every pumpkin pumpin', with a conviction that rewrote the dictionary. These are stitches. You will think of them when the news forgets its manners. Laughter is not an escape. It is a spare battery for courage. We keep the ethics, which is the word we use when kindness becomes policy. The teal pumpkin on the stoop will go into a bin with the other decorations, but its lesson designed for the vulnerable first, and you design better for everyone, will leak into other months. A porch that learned to offer stickers and glow rings learns to stock a spare scarf, to use a softer tone, to post a sign that says quiet from 6 to 7 because quiet is as much a welcome as light. This may sound grand for a bowl of trinkets. It isn't. Grand things are simply small things done on purpose. We keep the permission to invert a little, to mischief safely, to let children practice independence while adults perform the magic trick of being present but peripheral. That skill, hovering without smothering, guarding without grimness, is rare and beautiful. October hides it in a costume, so we can smuggle it into the year. Next spring, someone will use it at a crosswalk, at a science fair, at a first job. The muscle remembers. We keep a calendar of mercy. The same block thread that mapped cocoa and quiet hours will map casseroles and snow shovels. The same teen who controlled the fog machine will troubleshoot the sound at the spring play. The firehouse that parked with headlights like a makeshift moon will be at the 5K in June, hand out cups and jokes. Halloween doesn't just bond a neighborhood, it gives it channels. The history we've walked together returns, now as a chorus. Salmon's embers in pumpkin LEDs. Souling's reciprocity in a fun-size economy that is anything but trivial. Blackout drills in battery tea lights and planned routes. Radio panics outmaneuvered by group texts that decide, quickly and kindly, where to meet and when to shift indoors. Haunted theaters, teaching exits, and empathy that sneak into daily architecture. The digital lantern knitting porches into a temporary parliament. This isn't nostalgia. It's a supply chain of human sense running 2 millennia long. You might ask, because we've been honest all along, what becomes of fear when the night folds? It doesn't vanish. It changes jobs. It goes back to the weather report, to the doctor's appointment, to the worrying headline. But the version of you who meets it in November has new proof. You crossed a dark with rules. You were part of a map. You lent your light and borrowed someone else's. Fear still knocks. Now you answer with choreography. Let's take a last walk, gentle and particular. The street is quieter than its costume. A single leaf drifts in a porch's lamplight with the confidence of a curtain call. From a window, the thin music of dishes being stacked, a conversation editing itself into yawns. On the sill, a candle nub with a wick curled like a question mark beside it. A seed set aside to dry because someone plans to plant more pumpkins. Imagine that, as if the future were a garden we get to keep. The air smells faintly of cinnamon and cooling asphalt. The strange romance of a holiday that used everything and asked for nothing permanent. Shall we break the wall one last time? You're not just an audience. You have been, for a dozen chapters, a stagehand hauling the ancient props of hospitality a few inches forward, learning how a door becomes a public service, how a bowl of candy becomes policy, how a compliment becomes security. If this were a film, we would roll credits over a montage of hands, striking a match, tying a shoe, steadying a railing, pinching a wick, lifting a sleeping child from a stroller, tapping a text that reads home safe. The soundtrack would be familiar, the papery whisper of a rapper, the click of a porch switch, the sigh of a pumpkin, the small, yes, a neighborhood says to itself. And then we would fade not to black, exactly, but to late October gray that knows how to hold light. The lesson is older than bonfires, dressed now in plastic and pixels, meet the unknown together, inside a plan. It isn't glamorous. It is better. The scariest Halloweens we promised to show you turned out not to be monsters, but moments wobbles, corrected by choreography, weather met by ingenuity, rumor outvoted by kindness. The cure, every time, was the same 5 heirlooms. Portable light, names allowed, reciprocity at the door, masks that humble, licensed inversion. Keep them near. Tomorrow, The pumpkin becomes coffee cake. The cape becomes a blanket for the dog. The jack-o'-lantern ripens into memory in the garden. The map in your pocket becomes a bookmark in a book that took you 3 tries to start. The year turns. It always does. But on the night we've shared, we practiced the future. We built a small republic against the dark and left the door ajar for anyone who needed it. Blow out the candle. Watch the tendril of smoke write its cursive against the porch light and vanish. What remains is not empty. It's ready for November, for next year, for whatever knocks next. We'll answer the way we've learned, with light we can carry, names we can say, and a plan we're willing to share. By the time the last orange dot fades from the map, the lesson is simple enough to fit on a wrapper. The screen isn't the party, it's the invitation, the route map, the dimmer switch, and sometimes the flashlight you lend to someone who forgot theirs. Phones sleep on the dresser. The thread cools into a ribbon of thank yous. The porch cam keeps one last wave that looks like everyone and no one. Outside, a jack-o'-lantern holds its ember for a beat and gives that familiar tiny sigh. Tomorrow, the file will archive, but the muscle memory won't. And when the next unknown knocks out of season, out of costume, you'll have proof you can meet it together, inside a plan, with light you can carry and names you can say.